14th, 2025 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or simply send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could indicate which version of Cubase you're running, so if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, also which version number, so if it's 12, 13, 14, and which operating system, that information would be helpful. When asking questions, realize my ability to answer all the questions in real time may soon be eclipsed depending upon the number of questions, but we will go through all of the questions chronologically as asked. So if you don't see an immediate response to your question at that point, if we could avoid asking the same questions, we'll go through all the questions chronologically. We should have an index of all the topics covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends. And if you wanted to search for topics, I think we crossed over 40,000 topics that we've covered in the live stream since COVID had begun. You could go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating a wonderful site. We also have two people that serve as moderators. So we have Agent K and Jazz Dude. So they are not Steinberg employees. They do this to make it a better community experience, and we appreciate their efforts. We also want to give a special thanks to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of links and tutorials for the Steinberg community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm presenting from outside in the United States, from outside Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. One quick programming note. I'll be on vacation starting Thursday night, and so we won't have live streams this Friday or next Tuesday, but we will resume our live streams on Friday, June 27th, I believe, which is a week from Friday. So just a quick heads up with that. So no live streams for this upcoming Friday and Tuesday. I'll be going with my family to Dublin. So looking forward to that. Never been. All right. And with that, let's go ahead and begin. All right. Daniel Bader asks, hello, Greg. Is there a way to address a shortcut to open a specific saved track preset in Cubase 14 Pro? So unfortunately, I haven't found a way to. I don't think that there's a way to open specific track presets or preset with a keyboard shortcut. I've kind of asked for it personally as well, but I haven't been able to find a way to do that. So I don't believe it's possible. Okay, next question we see Stefan checking in, saying hello from Sweden. From Andrew Fox, just says, hi Greg, question. Is it better to have one instance of a VST sample player, Hallian, sine player, etc. with instruments on different channels, or have a single instance per instrument? Thanks. Generally, if we have multiple instruments on a single, multiple instruments within this, multiple sounds loaded up within a single instrument, that is depending upon the playback engine and the playback of the particular sources, that could only utilize, most of the time it's going to utilize one CPU core. So if we have 4 instruments loaded, that would load up on one instrument track, that would load up and utilize one CPU core. If you do multiple instances of the instrument, and that would allocate to different CPU cores. So that's good. I was just kind of right before we started, I was just kind of preparing to show this. So let's take a look at it. So I'm going to load up one instrument, and let's say we have in this particular part. So I have 4 instruments loaded in this one instance of Halion Sonic 7. So most VST instruments don't utilize multi-core, but Halion does, and we'll show that as well. So let's say we have 1, 2, 3, and we'll just add one more voice. So let's say we'll have basically 8 voices here. Okay, and I'm going to copy, so these are being routed out to the Halion Sonic. And as we come over, what we want to do is I'm going to copy this, let's say 4 times, and this is all going to be coming from one instance. Let me just keep those. Okay, so as we play this now, this is going to be one instrument that is going to play back 4 different voices of 8 voices each on a pretty complex patch. And let's open up and take a look at and this bottom one, I'm going to disable that particular track. All right, so we're going to open up our audio performance meter. All right, so now as we play, so we're basically playing 32 voices. Let me take a look at it. All right, now let's disable all of these, and I'm going to do kind of the same thing but run it on multiple instruments. So right now I'm just going to load up a single instrument. So I'm going to disable these particular tracks, and I'm going to duplicate this one here. So we'll enable this track and we'll duplicate it 4 times and compare. All right, so now when we play it back, we can see that CPU usage is much lower because we're able to kind of allocate those across different cores. So we will switch halfway through. So say as we play. So this is running one instance within one instrument within multiple instances. Now I'm going to take that and let's say disable, and I want to enable, and this is one instrument with multiple instances. So we're going to enable those tracks, and now when we hit play, you can see that the CPU is higher. So, you know, while it's not an example that's totally pushing the envelope, you can get a sense that generally, for the most part, running separate instances of the playback instrument can make a difference. Now, inside of Halion Sonic and Halion, and Groove Agent, you could also go over here to Options and say that you want to enable multi-core usage. So let's say we want to use 4 cores, and as we do this, now my one single instrument that has 4 different instruments can now run more efficiently because the actual playback instrument has multiple cores. So for the most part, generally I would say that you get better CPU allocation when running single instruments with one instance, like one instance of an instrument with a single instrument, as opposed to kind of more of a multi-timbral. Some of the playback engines, as we mentioned, do support multi-core, and that could negate that as well. So, so depending on the playback engine, But if I was to err on default, I would probably do single instruments. There's also some more flexibility for routing and stuff like that as well, and when you're exporting stems. All right, so wonderful to see Matt Elston checking in. We have Jan from Sweden and Cubase Index. All right, we see Bob Demers just saying howdy, howdy. Thanks for joining us. All right, we see Kushal Sharagan asks, or Charagon, hello, Greg. Why is my loops and sample aren't reading and it's showing a red caution even after it's reinstalled? I restarted both Cubase and a hard drive. So generally, if you see kind of like a little red flag, like to the left here, that indicates that you don't have, licenses. So if you see like a red circle with a horizontal white line, that would indicate that you don't have a license for that particular instrument sound. So when we see it like this indicates that it's licensed. When it's red circle with a white horizontal line, that's going to indicate that there's no license. So you've installed the sound set, but there's no active license. So you could look for that particular sound set and see if the licenses are available. But like when we go to the Steinberg download assistant, while you could download everything, not everything is going to run if you don't have a license to run for it to run. So it's probably showing that there's no actual license for the particular samples that you're working with. All right, I'll just cancel the update here. We'll show this. So you would go to My Products, and here you should see all of your particular products that is licensed for you. When we come over here, so we see all products and it says separate licenses required. So these, if you don't have, if you don't have the license, I wouldn't download and install that. And that's kind of a recent change that happened after the discontinuation of the server. And if you do have the license, if you purchase like the add-on license for that, we could go simply to your Steinberg Activation Manager, and just you'll probably see under not activated, you could see different elements here, but you could just choose to activate the particular license. And if you have the license, but generally when you see that indication, that means that you've installed the particular you've installed the library, but it's not seeing the license for it. All right, Darshana Raja Paksha asks, hey Greg, how are you? I'm doing great, thanks. Please show us how to correct pitch in vocals, timing in Vari Audio. Sometimes hard to correct timing and pitch without robotic sound. Okay. Okay, so let me just, I'll just undo the, all right, so I'm going to go to my vocal here. And within this, I'm going to reset the pitch changes. All right, so let me just find one I know doesn't have pitch shifting baked in. Okay, so I'm going to take this. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of take our piano part and drag it to the chord track so that we have our chords. I'm going to now double click and let's go to our very audio editor here. All right, so some tips on, if you want to, so I would tend to do mostly like pitch correction in here. So let's say, and you don't have to do like extreme amounts. So let's say, you stare at the ground, not a sound. So let's say I think this note is a little bit out. If you just grab from the bottom, you could adjust the pitch here. And one of the things that I always tend to do, like when doing vocal correction, is, I tend to not correct everything, and I take the same approach with quantization. So I don't try to come over here and let's make everything 100% and let's straighten pitch 100%. But where I hear it bothering me, then I could just make the particular adjustment there. So if we look at, and let's say where maybe they drifted here at the end of the phrase. All right, so if you notice that a phrase is pitchy, maybe select a couple of notes and bring those in line. Now there's two different modes with the Very Audio. So if we say, okay, I want to show all smart control. So we see our smart control option. And here we could just say, like, I want to do, we get more icons as we go around. So let's say as I wanted to, like where this note is drifting a little bit flat, I could come over and just say, okay, from that point, now when I grab my right handle, I could adjust the pitch directly from that particular point so that it doesn't drift down. We could also, what often makes things sound robotic, and we could think of the classic Cher song, I Believe, which was done in Cubase, which has, if we come over here and, if we completely straighten the vibrato, not a sound, tell me why. So that could sound a bit more robotic. Often one of the things that you could also do, like for transitions of notes, once we're in showing all of the smart controls, is if you wanted to just grab, you see this little triangle in the upper corners. If we drag that over, so I could say I want to concentrate, because kind of often the transitions between the notes can be really critical, but now when I straighten pitch, I could straighten the pitch only between these points, and then I could leave kind of the transitions going into the next notes unaffected. So this way, when we do a straighten pitch, we could just come right over here and move that. So we could say, okay, I want to straighten pitch in the middle of this particular note, just to kind of nail the tonal center. So now when we do that, so, we're able to kind of do a lot of tweaking. Now, when we want to adjust kind of rhythmic aspects, we could come over here and say, okay, just want to take this and start that phrase. We could warp kind of the beginnings. So let's say I want this to start later, and we want to change kind of the phrasing. So let's say, so if I want to kind of affect the rhythm, and then if you speed it up, sometimes that may affect the overall vibrato. And so, as we do this, so, but if I was doing more kind of, like if there was a lot of rhythmic correction, that's when I would probably choose to use the free warp tool. So if we go to our audio, we'll see under real-time processing, anytime we record audio, it's going to create hit points, but we can now create warp markers from the hit points. And if we go to our free warp and we kind of zoom in, we'll see kind of our yellow anchors. So if this note was early or late, we could just simply move these notes rhythmically just to, and if you want to add in a warp marker, say here, say, okay, I want this part, and we could adjust and stretch. And if we have this set to snap on, I could just have this automatically snap to different rhythmic values. So if it was a lot of rhythmic correction, I may use kind of the free warp instead and do the pitch correction in Vari Audio. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Darshana. All right, wonderful to see Taylor from Music from World Peace Records from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. Great to see you on, Taylor. Hope you're well. We see Jan giving kudos to Jazz Dude for this fantastic Super Cubase Forum unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. Great to see the artist known as Love. All right, and we have Vince from Winnipeg. Hope you had a nice weekend with your parents. All right, great to see Vishnu on. See Jacob, Eva. Let me just see. I think I have my Google Translator. Let me copy that. All right, I think Jacob's just saying hi. Thanks for joining us, Jacob. All right, we have Uno Memento checking in from Finland. So Vishnu asks, with Cubase 14 Pro, could you demonstrate auto punch, pre-roll, post-roll in Cubase while recording vocals? Okay, so let's say we want to do just a quick punch in on a particular phrase. Let's say we want to punch in on measure 12. So what we could do is I'm just going to come over here. So let's say, okay, I'm going to select or measure 10 here. And I just have a preference here. Sometimes if you're doing a lot of vocals, if you go to preferences, I think it's under editing that the cycle follows range selection. So if I hit I and O, and we see these indicated right here on our transport, just to the left of the main transport controls, you can see, okay, this is going to be our punch in and punch out. So this track is armed, and we've just punched in just like that. Now, we could also set what we call punch points, because we may want to have maybe a measure before, and let's say a measure after. But I want to punch in just in the middle, but I want to actually have like this part play, then punch in just for this section, but I want 3 measures to loop, but I'm going to record 1. So at that point, what we could do is, if we go to your transport, we could utilize punch points, and we can say set punch points to selection range, and we'll see these little red triangles. So now I'm going to activate the cycle. It's going to cycle, punch in, punch out, cycle, and just kind of punch in. So if you want like a pre-roll, post-roll for the benefit of the singers so they could sing along and maybe get an idea of what you're doing, you could utilize that. Now if we kind of come over to our bottom area here, and let's see if we could right click and we could activate pre-roll, post-roll. So as soon as we come over here, we're going to activate the pre-roll, post-roll, and all right. So now if we wanted to come over here, so we could just kind of expand this, and we can say, okay, I want this to do, let's say, a post roll. So while we're playing, I want it to go an extra measure. So let's say, I'm going to punch, let's say, as we come over here. So you could activate the pre-roll and post-roll there, but if you're doing punches, I would probably use the punch points and use the cycle as pre-roll and post-roll. So once you have those set up, so the punch point, the punch in and out will defaultly be set to the left and right locators. If you wanted to decouple that so that they're not inherently linked, just go to your transport menu to punch points, and you could just set a range and just automatically set the punch points to that particular range. And if we wanted to not activate punch in and punch out, we could do that, and you could lock that so it's only going to be locked to the locators or to punch points, either way. So let me know if that's helpful for you. Always wonderful to see Kerwin Young checking in from Atlanta, Georgia. All right, so we have SK Cyan Ali. How can I solve a problem when I open Cubase instrument? Show me nothing. Why? So there's a couple ways. So if we want to add an instrument and see the instrument directly after adding it, so if this is what you want to do, so let's come over here. I open up the Grand and I hit add track, that this instrument automatically opens up. That's going to be the preference that we could set. So if we go to your preferences or settings and come over here to plugins, we could see open effect editor after loading it. So if I want to now add a virtual instrument, I open up the Grand. The plugin itself won't open, but when we come over and have this particular preference turned on, so again, under VST to plugins, open effect editor after loading it, that now when we go to add an instrument track, we'll see that that instrument track is immediately visible. As soon as we add the track, it'll pop up, and I will do it for VST effect plugins in the same way. So let me know if that's what you want it to see. All right, so Music for World Peace Records asks, when a MIDI loop is saved and sent to a non-Cubase user, does the sound of the instrument carry over? So I think that MIDI loops are going to be kind of inherently tied to Cubase. So I don't know if you wanted the MIDI, if you wanted MIDI information to. So a MIDI loop will, if you're not familiar with this, if we come over and say, okay, I want to take this piano part here, so let's say, okay, I want to take measure 2 to measure 6. Okay, so I want to take this and I want to export this as a MIDI loop. I have to be on an instrument track, so let me just. Okay, so I move this over here. So now when you go to File, to Export, so generally MIDI itself isn't going to recall the particular sound, so we'll come over here. We'll call this Taylor, June 17th, 2025. Okay, so now if I do a new project, so I don't think other programs are going to be able to incorporate the MIDI loops. But a MIDI file itself just has the MIDI notes, and any MIDI CC may have a program change, but it's not going to actually load up the particular instrument. That's just a limitation of the design of MIDI itself. But if we want it to come over here, let's get to, let's see if we just, so say right here, here's our MIDI loop. Now when I drag that in, that's going to automatically load up the instrument for us. So MIDI loops I think are going to be kind of inherently tied to Cubase, but it won't load up the sound. A lot of people do kind of, this has kind of been an age-old dilemma of MIDI. You could say, I'm using, the grand, you say Yamaha C7. And you could kind of put the instrument plus the preset name in the particular name of the MIDI track, and someone could get a kind of an idea of what particular instrument and preset that you're using. So I think that the MIDI loops will work with Cubase so that it knows exactly what instrument to load up, and it will give you kind of more, so that the instrument will automatically show up, whereas a MIDI file, which would be kind of a universal interchange format, won't include that, but you could have a program change. But that is likely to maybe not send a program change to the right on a different instrument, would not preserve the original sound. All right, wonderful to see Tim Weinheimer checking in from Mission Viejo, California. You see Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas. All right, Prematron asks, hey Greg, having issues with my media browser, Cubase won't scan an external hard disk with my samples on it. My other DAWs do. I tried to rescan it, MediaBay, but that won't work too. So, make sure that, so when we go to, let's say, your MediaBay, so we'll come over here, let's go to MediaBay. So I use different external drives kind of frequently on my personal studio machine. I only have one simple drive, so make sure that you go to my computer here, and if we just kind of go, let's say, to your documents folder. So let's say, okay, I want to come over here. So I want to see this. So you could see any of your hard drives would show up here. And then just make sure that you come over here. Let's say you go to, okay, I want the AXR demo files. I want MediaBay to look in this folder, that you just have this particular folder checked. So it might not, if you rescan a folder and the folder isn't checked right over here, then you're basically telling MediaBay not to look into these particular folders for you. So make sure that you actually have the folder checked here. Otherwise, MediaBay will, it's almost like telling MediaBay to ignore those particular files. All right, wonderful to see John Barry from the English Riviera. Says it's hot in the bay today. All right, great to see Zephaniah. Says, hey Greg, how can I add a guitar part to the track without adding another track using Pro 13 on PC? So, it's, I used to get this question kind of more when, there was, far fewer tracks. It was almost a strategy, like going back to the Audio Media 3 cards, Audio Media 2 cards, like 32 years ago, that, you had 4 tracks of audio. So, let me know if there's a particular reason you can't add another track. So, I mean, we have kind of the benefit of unlimited tracks. So I think you could, if you had a guitar track and you wanted to bounce it down with another instrument to a single track, you could do that if you had a reason for a fixed number of tracks. But, it's really not the case so much anymore. So let me know if there's a particular reason that you don't want to add, or you can't add another track. So all right, so we see Jaman M. John says to play MIDI and Cubase simultaneously as audio in Pro Tools. How should the connections and routing be done using MIDI timecode and virtual audio cable? So I don't have a Pro Tools license where I could show it, but the two programs will synchronize with each other via MIDI timecode. You may need to have an audio to properly synchronize the audio. If you have audio parts, you would need to have like two different audio interfaces. I'm not sure if the virtual audio cable is going to be carrying over the audio clock between the two programs. But if you wanted to kind of do this, let's say if I wanted to play audio, and this isn't the answer for your question, but you could probably, so easily do it inside of Cubase. So let's say if I come here, you say, okay, I have the grand. I want to set the grand as my input channel. And now as we play, I could just record. And just record the audio. And the MIDI simultaneously into Cubase. So you could, so I'm not familiar with the virtual audio cable. I've never needed to use it because I could do everything inside of Cubase. But if it transmits the audio, I guess you could use that. But depending on what audio interface you're using for your Pro Tools, if you're using separate audio interfaces. So if you give me some more information, that would be helpful. All right, we have from Learn with Steven. Hi, Greg. Today's 14 Pro, Windows 10. Can you help me set up a group track for my guitars? I have 4 microphones and a DI into my Steinberg UR44C. So if you wanted to set up like a group track for audio tracks, so let's say if I come over here and we have our 4 audio tracks. So the fastest way I found is if you select the tracks, right click in the track column area like here, and just say add group track to selected tracks. And we'll say this is our guitar group. And now all these tracks are routed, the outputs are routed to the guitar group. So if you select the 4 guitar parts and then come right over here, you could add a group track to selected tracks right there. Wonderful to see Tiago checking in from Brazil. We have James Bastani checking in from Beverly Hills. Thanks for joining us. All right, Birdman says Cubase look cool but complicated for a beat maker, almost does too much. Well, it's instead of having to buy, like, I see so many people, it's like, oh, I run this program for loops, I run this program for audio, I run this program for MIDI, I run this program for notation, I run this program for instruments, that you could have one program in Cubase to do that. If you want to just simply use Cubase to make beats, that's super fast and easy too. So let's say if if I come here, let's say we'll start from scratch. So I'll say, okay, let's remove all these tracks. So let's say, okay, I want to make a quick beat. I'll just say, let's go to a drum machine. All right, let's add a drum track. And we could load up a quick preset here. All right, so now I have kind of my beats, and when we go to the editor, I can now just kind of come over and let's come over here and say, okay, let's get to our hi-hat. We could just kind of and if we say, okay, I want to throw in like some quick 30-second notes. And let's just add a couple. And then when I want that into my project window, I could just kind of drag. So you could treat Cubase very simply, or you could treat Cubase as kind of the tool that allows you to complete all of your current and future tasks in one simple solution. So, all right. All right, we see from Andrew Fox is perfect, Greg. Thanks for the great answer. I hope you have an amazing time in Ireland. If you need any tips, let me know, and I can email you. I've lived in and around Dublin on my life. Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, so if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I think we're going to do just a day trip out to Cliffs of Moher, and we're going to try to avoid driving, so we're doing like a bus tour out. But yeah, anything that you could share would be great, and I appreciate that. All right, we see Tim K checking in from Zeist in the Netherlands. His cat buddy is waving a paw to my cat Steven, and Mark Ravensdog, Stella, and other pets nearby. All right, so PR just says, hi Greg, could you please make a quick overview, insights of 3 key functionalities of the latest version of Nuendo versus Cubase for pro audio gaming and post-production, please, thinking about cross-grading. All right, so we'll show you a couple unique things that are kind of in Nuendo that are kind of, beyond the scope of Cubase. So if you're doing like game audio production, one of the things that you'll just open up quick. All right, so, one of the things is just being able to come over and, say, because obviously when we're working with game audio, there's a lot of great functionality that's going to be primarily for, where it's going to be like a non-linear workflow. So if I don't think I have Wise installed on my system, but Wise is a very popular game middleware originally developed by Audio Kinetic. But if we wanted to come over, we could just say, let's go to the game Audio Connect. And if you have Wise installed, at this point, you could just drop assets directly from Cubase into Wise. And the beauty of this, it's bi-directional communication. So let's say you did a whole project, like a sound design project in Nuendo at kind of different levels of intensity. We can now export that to Wise. And when we do like our export audio mix down, we're going to have the capability and let's say we're in the middle of Wise, we can say, oh, I really need to change the balance of that. You could just simply in Wise kind of right click on the asset and open that directly and launch the Nuendo project that created that to make little tweaks. So there's great kind of bi-directional compatibility. There's also a lot of significant plugins. Like for games, like you may have to come up because if you watch a movie for an hour and 40 minutes, but you may spend a month in a game, so like the sound quality can sometimes be significantly higher. Let me see if this is all right. So just check my audio routing here. Let me switch my audio interface. Okay, so let's see, I think this should. So let's say we have kind of like the same sound effect, but we want it to be slightly different. Like some of the cool things that we could do here is just say, okay, I want to take this and let's do just a quick audio offline processing. So, and we could just choose a plugin, and there's a randomizer plugin. So when I come over here, we can now just, as we process those files, as we play back, instead of it was like one file that was repeated, it will just do subtle random. So this way we could, if you have like one gunshot and you don't want it to be the same gunshot sound every single time, you could just completely easily randomize different sounds. Also, there's some like really fantastic dialogue. So if you're working with ADR functions, you can come over here and like as we want, there's reconforming. But like as you wanted to do like ADR functionality so that you could just come over here, there's an complete ADR workflow so that you could do dialogue replacement and localization for different countries. So a lot of these tools like ADR functions, I remember being at Electronic Arts in the Bay Area, like Mountain View-ish area, and like one of their big things was, like they actually had a purpose. They spent like significant development time making a dialogue tool that they eventually replaced with Nuendo because it had to be kind of purpose built. So if you're doing dialogue, game audio, sound design for post-production, there's also transcription services available. So there's lots of great stuff in Nuendo specifically for game and kind of audio post-production, sound design work. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so we have Pertti Komenen checking in from Finland. All right, we see Bratman Studio. Retracted a bunch of messages. All right. Chris Ibbotson just says audio manipulation so great. It says loving your work, Greg. Thanks for the compliment. Appreciate it. All right, Darshana says, after recording guitars, do we need to edit the timing of audio? If so, how could we do that accurately? Could you please show me the correct way to edit the timing of guitars? Okay, so probably like we touched on with the corrections. Let me just open up project like the free warp tool. I think I have a guitar example. All right, so let's listen to this. And this is played by Gareth, and it was hard for him because I told him he had to play with intentionally bad timing. So let's go ahead and just solo this. All right, so when we want to do this, what you could do if you're starting from scratch, again, like hit points will automatically kind of be taken into account. So I'm going to come over here. Let's go to, let's say within the sample editor. So we could come over to our hit points, and we want to make sure like our hit points are kind of set, by default, it will have a lot of different hit points, but we could set the intensity. So let's say we want our intensity, let's adjust our threshold intensity here. Okay, so we could now come over here. Now, once we figured out what the hit points are, we could just say, let's create warp markers. So now when I go to the free warp tool, and we could just have our snap on. So let's go ahead and do some warp editing. So we're going to select our free warp. Now, if you see it and it's like, oh, I don't see anything, it has to be at a certain zoom factor. So let's say now I want to come over here, and let's say we're listening to this guitar part. So let's say, oh, I just want, and you could just place a warp marker here, say, I want that to be right on the beat. I want this is early, so we could actually just kind of snap it to the grid as we do this. So let's say, okay, I just want to, let's say, eighth notes here. So as we snap, we can just have that automatically snap to the grid. So if we say, okay, let's come here. So let's say, okay, that was late. So I could move that way early if we want to try a different feel. So let's say that was late. Let's move that. And if we want to do this for like multiple parts at once, so let's say we have like 2 mics on our guitar. So let's say we want this. So let's say we want to put a warp marker here and here. So, and we want to kind of put, now if I come over here and I put just a single warp marker, so let's say I put a single warp marker here and I move it, it's going to kind of move all of the different elements. So let's say I come here, we put our warp marker on both, and now as we move, it will move kind of the before and after. So if you want, it's always good to say, okay, have a warp marker before and after, and then you could just move if multiple parts are selected. We could come right over here, say, okay, let's take that. And again, you could create these with the hit points like we showed just a minute ago, but if this is a little early or late, we can just adjust the timing of this very easily using the free warp. So let me know if that's good for you, Darshana. All right, the Skin Flutes official says, why when I recorded my guitar connected to the Sapphire 18i20, the sound is always flat, even when I add external effect of plugins. So if the sound is flat in pitch, it could be a sample rate problem. But generally, I wouldn't think that as you're recording it would be a sample rate problem. If it just kind of sounds lifeless, it could be, if you're recording your guitar directly into the system, make sure that, most audio interfaces, I know the Steinberg UR series has a high Z input, and that would be the correct impedance, kind of the level that is output from like a guitar or a bass when it's connected directly into the system. They're not line level. So if you have the ability to connect it to like a high Z switch, so if I come over, let's just look at, so if we look at the UR22C, all right, just to kind of show you this switch. All right, so here you could see that input 2 is a high Z switch, and then so you would connect your guitar into input 2, and that input has the correct impedance. So let me know if it's flat in pitch or if it's flat and just kind of lifeless. And, generally a lot of times, people will record through amps because the direct sound of the guitar is kind of lifeless, but if you could specify and clarify that would be great. All right, Flyv just says, question, when I import a MIDI file, how can I see all notes played other than just one line? So if your MIDI file, there's two types of MIDI files. So there's a MIDI file type 0 and a MIDI file type 1. So MIDI file type 0s, all of the data comes in on a single track. And that's kind of to be compatible with older, like when people would play out live years ago and the laptops were very expensive, people would use hardware sequencers. Load up their whole set on a floppy disk and hope that it all worked. So with hardware sequencers, like a Brother, think an Alesis MMT8, a Roland MC500, those sequencers generally like to have a type 0 MIDI file, and it's probably, I think it's Cubase will automatically split a type 0 MIDI file, but it could be a preference. So let's say if we go to your preferences to MIDI files, and it's on import, let's see if there's, yeah, so there is a preference here for auto dissolve format 0. So if it does, make sure, so if it is a type 0 MIDI file and it's not dissolving, you could just come over here and make sure that that is checked. If you have a MIDI file that's in the system already and it's all in one track and you look at it like, let's say in a list editor, and you see that the MIDI channels here are all different MIDI channels, what you could do is just to simply select that event, go to MIDI, and you'll see dissolve part, and then you'll see if you have multiple channels on that part, you could choose to separate by channels. So make sure that that preference is checked. Okay, so we'll come over here to settings. So make sure auto dissolve format 0. And if it's already in, try to go to MIDI, select the event, and choose to dissolve separate channels, and see if that does the trick for you. All right. All right, so we see rolling stuff. Hi, Greg. I've added a groove agent drum beat to a piano bass track and would like to edit a couple of the sounds. The snare's a bit harsh for this particular song. Is that possible, please? Okay, so let's say I want to take... okay, so let's do kind of piano-based. Here, I'll just... Okay, I'm just going to import. We'll just do a new project here quickly. Okay, so I'm just going to add Okay, so let's say I'm just going to have a quick piano part, and let's put a groove agent on. All right, so let's say I want to come over now to the sound itself. All right, so I'm going to click the snare. You know, so when we do this, we could say, okay, I want to, you know, maybe I want to take more, you know, so we add more overhead, but we could adjust the attack. You know, other things that you could do is just kind of, and there's plugins that you could run. So let's say I just want to go to, you know, so we go to the mixer, let's go to the snare. So if I want it to come over here to the snare, we could say, okay, I want to increase maybe the frequency here. So let's say I'll select my snare track. So we go to the EQ. So there's lots of different, 4 bands of parametric EQ just on the snare. We could go to the envelope shaper. So if you wanted to adjust the attack. And there's also, full compression that you could use. So say, okay, I want to do more compression. And you could just really sculpt the sound quite a bit with the built-in processing. So, every single track, if you're using like an acoustic agent kit, you could come over here and just say, okay, I want to do tape saturation, envelope shaper, EQ. If it is more of a beat agent kit, we could still get a lot of these. So let me just, so if it shows up as a kit like this, we could select like our snare sound and come over here and be able to adjust and run different effects on this snare as well to then that way you could do like a lot of effects processing that you would on a large format console with the built-in functions of Groove Agent as well. All right, Louis Palomino says how to preview MIDI files in Cubase. Is it possible? So MIDI files themselves don't have any particular sounds, but if we have like different MIDI loops here, so if we come over, so MIDI itself is just like note on, note off. Think of it like the letters in a text file, so it doesn't like read itself. But if we want it to, let me just jump back over. Let's say we're looking on our desktop. I think I may have a MIDI file or two. If you wanted to preview, you could come over here and say, okay, I want to preview this MIDI file through a particular plugin. So we can say, okay, I want to come over here to so as we're previewing even though this is a standard MIDI file, we could choose an instrument here to preview the sound. So, but again, a MIDI file itself doesn't have any inherent sounds. It's just notes that could be played back through something that generates sounds. So generally that's why you don't preview, but you could have a preview instrument to listen to the different parts. And again, you would see that just in the lower hand zone of the right zone MediaBay, or if we come to the full MediaBay, you could just come over here. And once we're looking at MIDI files, let's say we're only looking for MIDI files now. So we could choose like the preview instrument here that would play back and preview through. All right, so wonderful to see Audi and Lee checking in from Austria. Thanks for joining us again. See, Learn with Steven just says, thank you, Greg. Greg, enjoy your vacation. Looking forward to it. My wife's already over in Dublin, just on doing a training for her company. All right, wonderful to see Val checking in from Vienna. He's been lurking until now. All right, and he says, luckily he wrote his questions down. All right. Okay. All right. Desire 1945 says, how can I adjust the drum machine to 3/4 time signature? So the drum machine is, when we do this, is just going to be the sound source. So we come over here, let's add a drum track. Okay, so the drum machine itself doesn't have any meter per se, so this is just a sound generation. Now when we go to the editor, it'll default to 16 beats. And if we want to do 4/4, we could just simply come over here and say, okay, I want it to be 12 beats. So we can say, now as we play. All right, so we'll say, okay, let's do. All right, so we'll come here, make it 12 beats. Oh, we'll just come here, say make it 12 right there. So now we could program in 3/4. So say, okay, we want to come over here. And then, so you could just set the number of steps in the pattern editor to 12. So that would give you like 16th notes, 12 divisions. So instead of like 4 beats of 4/16 notes per beat and 4 beats, you could just simply change that to 12. And now you're in 3/4. And you could just kind of come over here. So we could just come our play probability here. And now you could just kind of have a 3/4 beat, but just come right here to the number of steps. You could change that to 12 or 24, kind of whatever you want to do right there. So now it's just in 3/4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So that's what you can do. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, we have GBSTR checking in, joining us from Israel. Thanks for joining. So DJFK just has warp marker with big. All right, so we see Pre, so great to see you on, says having problems in Nuendo 13 with routing my hardware compressors, EQs. I have a RME Fireface UFX3 and Faro Fishpulse 16 and a dangerous 2-bus XT. All right, so when we're utilizing, and if you want to email me, like kind of like what your screenshots look like to clubcubase@steinberg.de. I think you have my email from earlier, Pre. But make sure you go to the studio connections, and when we go to your external effects, The concept is if we're going to add an external effect, we could choose where we want it to be in stereo or mono. So if it's a stereo effect, and some people will treat it as as a stereo unit, or if you have like a stereo compressor where they could be function independently or function as a stereo unit, you may have to have kind of different settings for that. But once you have kind of your external effect, you want to just simply come over here and define the inputs and outputs of where that external effect is going to. So at this point, we can say, okay, it's going into my RME inputs, outputs, 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 for my other unit, or, going in 3 and out 3. So you would connect it here. Then when utilizing the when you want to access the particular effect, you would just say, okay, we want to get to my inserts. We will see our external plugins. So let's say, okay, I want to use my lexicon, let's say in this case, and there's a measure delay button, because when you go out into the real world back into the system, it will introduce latency, just the conversion stages. You can click on measure delay. It will measure that delay and automatically compensate. Now, when you're using an RME interface, a couple of things. Make sure that your total mix is set up correctly to input and output those. And it could also, one other thing that could be a factor is coming over here and just make sure that direct monitoring, you could try to toggle that and see if that makes a difference. But if your interface is set into like direct monitoring mode, you may have to disable that. Okay, so Val asks, says, question, the mod wheel on my MIDI keyboard broke, but it has 20 other faders. Can I route one of them to be the new mod wheel? It is outputting CC. So CC is, modulation is a CC. It's a CC1. So within the controller itself, you probably have settings for what MIDI CCs are being transmitted. You could just, and most of the time, if it has those functions, you could manually assign what CC is being transmitted when that knob is moved. So at that point, you could just change that setting to transmit MIDI CC1 from whatever setting it's on currently. So usually that's going to be done it's easier to do it within the actual controlling keyboard itself. There's ways in Cubase, if for some reason that's fixed, let me know, Val. I'll be happy to kind of show you a way. And if you tell me if it's fixed, what particular controller it's fixed on, then I could show you input transformer if necessary. All right, we have Nikolai joining from Sofia, Bulgaria. Thanks for joining us. Always wonderful to see Brian Sawyer checking in from Yuma, Arizona. Sable Winters is like number 47, checking in from Bay Area, California. All right, Tim K says, I tend to ingest instrument audio DI alongside any other inputs, mic, amp effects, etc. The DI track version is available, warts and all, which I find useful for working with inside of Cubase. Yes, it's always a great idea, I think, for every guitarist to record a DI. I'll show you just kind of like an example here. And I used to do this in the early days when be doing session work, and the guitarist was always, very concerned about, their amp sounds. And, I did it with a friend of mine. And he was just like, he's like, I told you my amp sounds awesome. We're in the studio. And what I did was basically just I recorded the DI and I reamped it through like an early Sans amp, like the very first Sans amp. And he was just like, oh, it's so great. Told you. But even in this example here, I'll play for you. All right, so like all the guitars are coming from. So if we were to solo the guitar parts here. So all these guitars are just with the amp rack. So that's what these tracks sound like. So if we're kind of so always recorded the guitar direct, so you could send it out to an amplifier, reamp it, or if you wanted to run it through a plugin, like here we're running it through the VST amp rack. You get all sorts of great choices to work with in software these days. So always record a DI track, can't hurt. Always so wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. He was at the eye doctor's for an appointment. He checked both eyes and are still in the correct place. That's good. All right, so the virtual ice cream distribution will begin. All right, Artist Knows Love wants everyone to hit the like button. All right, Captain Cricket 3D says, hello, Greg. What's the quickest way to transfer my default plugin settings from one computer to another? I have my plugin settings saved, but need to transfer them to my new setup. Thank you, sir. So the easiest way is you go to your edit menu, come over here, and you'll see a profile manager. Not that. Sorry, operator error. So we go to your profile manager. Try it one more time. All right. And what you do is export the profile from your older computer, save it onto a USB flash drive, save it to like a cloud drive, and import that directly into the new computer. And then all of your presets, your macros, preferences, global workspaces, your default plugin presets, all that will be transferred over. So again, go to the edit menu in your old computer, go to profile manager, export it. I usually put mine on a USB flash drive and import it to the new computer. All right, Igor H. Radek asked, what is the option inspector tab, a note and explanation pop-up switch from time-based between musical and linear? What is that? Okay. All right, so let's say all right, and let me just make a quick instrument track here. Okay, I'll just make this. make this so it's more obvious to see. Okay, so when we see we have two different time bases inside of Cubase. Okay, so let's say if I copy this over here. All right, so we have musical and linear. All right, now if a track, all right, so, and this matters on what happens when we change the effect. So let's say, you know, we're playing, we see our MIDI and it's kind of on the grid here. Now, if this track is set to linear mode and I change the tempo, these events on this track are going to stay at their time position. So I'm going to add a ruler track. All right, and we're going to make this seconds. Okay, so right now we see that this is roughly starting at measure 11, but roughly around 20 seconds. So now that this track is set to linear mode, I adjust the tempo of my project here. So let's turn this, we'll adjust our tempo down. And we can see that we went from measure 11, but when we slowed the tempo down, it still stayed at 20 seconds. So we went from 120 to 104, and it stayed at its position. Now I'm going to take this track and put this track into musical mode. Okay. Now when a track is in musical mode, it will stay at the same bar and beat position when the tempo changes. So I'm going to change my tempo here to 100. So this top track is in linear mode, where we see this indicated by the clock. This track is in musical mode. So now I adjust from 120 to say 100 beats a minute. We could see that this is still at 20 seconds, but since this is in linear, these events stayed at their time position. Now when it's in musical mode, it stayed at its bar and beat position. So this stayed still at 20 seconds, and this stayed at measure 11, but is now playing back roughly at 15, 16 seconds. So when we adjust the tempo, the tracks that are in linear mode, linear time base rather, will stay at their time position, and tracks that are musical time base will stay at their musical position. Now imagine we were scoring for a film and all of a sudden, we see a bird take off, and we want that, and we have a sound that's associated, a musical sound that's associated with that bird. We could place that track into linear time base, and that sound will always happen when that bird is flying, to be in sync with that, even if I change the tempo of tracks that are in musical time base. So the tracks that are musical time base can speed up and slow down, but if we wanted to tie a specific event or sound or MIDI notes to a specific time position, then we would place that into linear time base mode. Let me know if that makes sense. All right, George from Germany asks, can you go over the changes in the mouse wheel hover over function? I've seen on the Steinberg forums, users are having problems. I can't set it so that on hover over inserts, the wheel scrolls. Okay, so let's say we have inserts on here. Okay, so let's add a delay. Okay, so there are some changes. So if we go to your settings, and it's happened in 14.03 at the request of users, and we have controls. All right, so it used to be in old Cubase versions, if we had multiple tracks here, let me add some more audio tracks. And we go to our mix console, that, you know, people would come over here and they would just accidentally move the mouse, and the mouse would automatically control different parameters. So if we had, for instance, the EQ open, and let's say I started scrolling from here, that instead of scrolling downward, that we would adjust the particular value of a parameter here. So, and people didn't like that. So we changed, when we redesigned in 13 the capability of having scrollable inspectors, we added the capability of a preference to say, okay, we want to disable the mouse wheel in scrollable areas. So now when I'm over here, I don't adjust the parameters, but when I'm in this area, anything that's like in the scroll area, when we kind of click here, the parameters don't adjust, but I could still adjust, parameters in the mix console. And people are like, I just don't want to adjust any parameters with my mouse scroll wheel. So now with 14.03, we could just say disable all parameters here. So, and now no parameters will be adjusted via scrolling. It's only going to scroll. So that was the difference that was made. And the preference used to be under editing, but it's now moved to controls. And if you want it in previous modes, like in 13 with the preference enabled, it was this. And if you wanted it to be in earlier versions of Cubase, you could just choose to enable the scrolling or not enable the scrolling at all. So a lot of people wanted the scrolling of parameters to never happen, and so that was introduced into 14.03. So let me know if that's helpful, George. All right. All right, so you see from Vince, 5E says, thanks, Greg. The only thing is when I go to dissolve part, I can't click separate channels. It's just separate pitches. So it could be, so let's say if I come here to this and I go to my MIDI dissolve part, right, so right now I don't have separate channels. So it could be that your MIDI file itself is only perhaps maybe one part. So let's say if I go into my MIDI list editor, or I'll just select these particular notes, and I'm going to switch these from channel 1 to channel 3. So now if we have notes that are in channel 1 and channel 3 in an event where there's multiple multiple MIDI channels in, let's see, I think it may automatically, when I go to dissolve part, then to separate channels. So it could be that your particular MIDI file is, everything is on one channel in the MIDI file, and you can see that pretty quickly if you go to the MIDI. And so if it sees everything on one channel, it doesn't offer you the dissolve channels part. But if we come over here, you could just say, go to your MIDI list editor, And here we can see that, you know, on, and you may have to kind of scroll this over just a little bit to the right, but you can see that, you know, we have notes that are in MIDI channel 1, notes are in MIDI channel 3. So if we have more than one MIDI channel in the part, that's when the dissolve channels becomes available. But, you know, let me know if it's just like a drum part or if it's like a drum, piano, bass, strings, organ, all in one MIDI file. So, but it could be that the MIDI file was only one particular part. And if that's the case and they're all on the same MIDI channel, then you don't see the separate channels functionality. All right, we see the virtual ice cream distribution has begun. All right. All right, so we see Flyvy says, oh, I got it all working now. Just had to click in the editor. All right. All right. I have to scroll up. Find my spot again here. Okay, so we have Nishad checking in from Sri Lanka. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we see Roland Stepp says, many thanks for your help for a very full answer in changing kit sounds in Groove Agent. I'm using a Beat Agent kit, so thanks for showing me how to adjust it. Very helpful. All right, Luis Palomino says, thanks, Greg. That was wonderful. So you're welcome. Glad to help. All right, Sajan K asks, why do I have to activate the listen speaker button on an instrument track? If I have to play it, usually the track plays when the track is selected. All right, so let me just add a quick instrument track here. Okay, so it could depend upon preferences. So let's say, okay, when I select this particular track, so if we just come over to settings and we go to editing, it might be under project and mix console, so you could just say enable record on selected MIDI track. So if that is turned off when I select a track, it doesn't sound. But again, when we go to settings, editing, project and mix console, enable record on selected MIDI track, if that is turned on, now when I select the track, it's automatically going to pass MIDI to that particular track. So again, settings, editing, project and mix console, enable record on selected MIDI track. You could also do it on audio tracks independently. So give that a try. Okay. All right, Captain Cricket 3D says, hi Greg, in our question, can you explain what a red folder, white folder, and orange folder mean in the MediaBay? All right, so I think red folders are being scanned currently. Let's come over here. All right, so when I go to scan a folder, so I'm going to rescan, it will turn red, indicating that that is being scanned. So I'm not sure what the orange folder is, but the white folder is, all right, so when we see this kind of demure kind of grayed out looking color, that means it's not turned on. Let's see, and when it's rescanning, then that's when it turns red. So sometimes it may. So but I'm not sure if I get it to do orange, but I've seen orange. I'll see if I could get it figured out. All right, great to see Daniela Da Vinci Girl on. Let's see. See some discussion about the Beach Boys with Brian Wilson's passing. See, and Michael Team says he got to see them live a lot in 4th of July celebrations. They used to always play in DC on 4th of July. They were drunk a lot when they played in 4th of July. So. All right, so we see, it says, hi sir, how do I set fader 1 and fader 2 on my MIDI controller to become dynamic in expression when I'm using strings? So it really depends on what MIDI CCs the string library is utilizing for the dynamics. So some string libraries may use, MIDI CC11, MIDI CC1, and you go to a different library, they may be, one may be using CC1, maybe using CC11. So it really depends upon what the instrument is responding to, and then you need to set that in the controller itself to match the, whatever MIDI CC is needed for the dynamics for the string library. So. But if I wanted to do this for so say let's add a track, we'll add an instrument track here, and we'll just do a Hallian Sonic, and we'll do like the Iconicus sketch here. So let's say we're going to go to cello sound, and I'm going to put it into legato. So now my modulation wheel controls the dynamics. So you see as I move the mod wheel here. So it really depends on what MIDI CC message the instrument itself is doing. If I load a different instrument, it could be CC11, it could be CC74. So you just have to kind of match it for the particular instrument. So let me know if that makes sense for you. Okay. All right, so we see from channel ripoff says hi G under scale assistant, show scale, no guides. I can't see the color difference in the guides that well. Is there any way to change the color to make the guide stand out? All right, so let's say if we come here to, I think it is pretty subtle. All right, so let's get to our scale assistant here. And let's see if we adjust kind of the background settings here. Okay, so let's say we'll do all right, so let's say if we go from all right, so let's say if we are in so you can see it a little more clearly there. Now, one of the things that is also helpful with this, so I know it is a bit subtle, but if you just come to the pitch visibility, and now you could say show only pitches from the scale assistant. So that might be if, but it is, I realize it is subtle. I'll mention that again to the team. Okay. All right, so we have Mr. Hammett64 just saying, hey, Greg. So. All right, Mr. Hammett64 says, sorry if too off topic, but what computer would you recommend for a person learning to mix? So I think, any new computer that you get, I would get, minimum 16 gigs of RAM, so while you may save money going 8 gigs, I think the 16 gigs of RAM can make your computer last an extra year. If you could get more memory, I think any of the Ryzens, any of the M series Apples, any of the Intels, also the Snapdragons, all provide kind of, great performance. I think it's a really great time to be making music on computers because the computers are really fast enough and we're not kind of fighting audio performance issues constantly for most projects. So I think anything, I would get 16 gigs of RAM, obviously like an SSD drive, and I think you'd be in great shape. And either Mac or PC, it's really just kind of more of a personal preference, whatever you want to use. All right. See, Bratman Studios rediscovering his Korg M1. All right, Mr. Hammett64 says, how big a thing is Mac over PC in production? So either of them, I think, are fine and offer great performance. So, it could be kind of a very polar thing. I run both Mac and PC, and they both run great to me. So. And Jazzu just says, this is great advice. Use the OS you understand and you can achieve anything fast. All right. All right, Prezel Prescott asks, how do you set up Score Editor to notate your MIDI tracks? So it's really, pretty easy to do. Let me just come over. So let's say at this point I wanted to take here, I'll just revert this. Okay, so if we wanted to say select our piano part, I could hit Control or Command plus the letter R, and then we could just see our everything kind of just laid out for us. I think we're in the key of G in this song. So if we just say, okay, I want to take this, let's grab our key signature. And now we could just come right over, and then we could just have all the notation done. So, or you could just go to the score menu and open the score editor from the selection. We could also look at the score editor in the bottom zone as well. All right, so we see Sajin K says, yes, thank you, that worked, awesome. All right, so we have Ryan Hardos just saying hi, Greg, in chat. He says, oh, I'm late, don't worry about it. There's no tardy slips. Everyone's on time. We're just happy you're here. Only punishment is you have to hit the like button immediately if you're late. All right, so we see Brian Sawyers tell Michael Teams it's supposed to be 113 by the weekend in Yuma, Arizona. So, all right, Cornell just sending greetings from the Netherlands. All right, so we see from Tony Trunzo in Australia. Can you tell me why in my Steinberg account under vouchers I have Spectral Layers 40% off when I already owned Spectral Layers? Cheers. So I think that there is a voucher if you took advantage of the, if you're taking advantage of the current WaveLab promotion, that you could have, that if you had just activated a WaveLab license, that it put a voucher into your Spectral Layers for a 40% off discount. So it's just a nice, extra nice thing that Steinberg did. All right, Michael Teams wants everyone to smash the like button. And Michael Team says, and send Brian some AC so he could manage 113 degrees. All right, so let's go to some questions that were sent in advance. All right. So one of the questions we had, this is just showing it, and it was kind of more of a follow-up to demonstrate it, of on the last live stream is like, can you show how to split processing up to different processing cores, like maybe utilizing different, different like group tracks to split up CPU processing. So let's take a look at it. So create a kind of an example file here. Okay. So as we've mentioned on previous live streams, if we have, and I'll just turn down the mix because this won't make much musical sense, but we'll see kind of the audio performance meter. All right. Okay, so I'm going to have one track here. And this track is going, we'll say we're going to send this track to group 4. And group 4 here has 4 insert effects. So I'm going to take this one track here. And we'll turn off the send. So we'll send this to group 1 here. All right, so group 1 has 4, and I kind of use this one multi-tap delay plugin preset because it basically comes with like, it's running like 30, each one of these is running about 15 or 16 different plugins inside of it. So when I play this particular track, and we send it to a group channel where we have 4 of these inserts available. So when we do this, we have this track is using one CPU core, and its group track is utilizing one CPU core. So let's open up and take a look at our VST our audio performance meter. So we'll just play this, and I won't subject you to this going through like a massive guitar rig delay. So we play this, so all this is being sent to one CPU. We go to the audio performance meter, and we could get an idea of where our performance is because we're utilizing 4 heavy plugins on that one insert track. Okay, so we see we're like maybe 40% of CPU because this one track is utilizing one CPU core, but and it says, oh, it's one track, but this can't necessarily split. But if I take these different tracks here, and I'll move this Hallian down. All right, so now I want to take one plugin. So again, just to get our baseline, we go to our audio performance. We can see where that is. So now I want to send this to 4 different groups, and each of these groups has its own effect going to it. All right, and we want to go to this particular track and make sure that it's being sent out to our 4 effects send. So we're going to send this to, it's currently going out to group 1. We'll send it to group 2, group 3, and group 4. Turn it on. Okay, so now this is being sent to 4 groups. Each group has the plugin on it, and let's see how it scales. So open up our audio performance meter, and we're going to notice that it's much less performance because each of these groups, because it's on its own separate track, is utilizing one CPU core for each one. So we could see that, if you had like a massive 16 channel, 16 inserts on a particular channel, and you wanted to play that back, and you notice that, oh, I only have one track and it's all of my audio performance is being maxed out, that you could send it to different groups and kind of split up the processing on those groups to get, and this way each one of these can utilize different CPU cores. Now, if we don't want to use groups, so let's say, okay, I have all of my effects going on and all of my sends are populated. So what we could do, another method, is just to come over and say, okay, I want to take this track, and we could go to like direct routing. So when we come over here to my mixer settings, we're going to say direct routing mode summing on. We're going to go to our mixer settings and make sure that direct routing is turned on, which it is here. And let's go ahead and go to our direct routing. So now I could take this. So if I don't want to use any of my sends on that particular track, and I want this to be bussed out to my stereo output. So right now, instead of sending this to group 1, we're going to send it to our stereo out. All right. So when we go to our direct routing, I could just say, let's put it on to group 1, group 2, group 3, and group 4. Okay, and now when we do this, that's another method to kind of split up the different CPU usage as well. So we could just come right over here let's see if we, so now all those are still going out to the 4 groups without using any aux sends. And we look at our audio performance, and because those are going to separate group tracks, and we go to our audio performance, we still see that the audio performance is significantly less. So again, if we think of loading up one track with 16 plugins, that could take, that could overwhelm a single CPU core, which would overwhelm the audio performance. And people go, oh, it's not utilizing all the cores. So it depends on the routing, how the different processing could get sent to different cores, and basically all the DAWs will work the same way. Not all DAWs will use all the cores. A lot of DAWs don't use the efficiency and performance cores that are offered in contemporary computers, but Cubase takes full advantage of that. So, instead of loading up one track with multiple inserts in a mission critical where you're running out of audio performance, you could put those inserts across to different groups. And if you wanted to just use the particular groups as sends, if you don't want to affect your sends because you're using your sends for effects, then just simply route them via the direct routing. And when we come over here, we could say, just make sure that you have the direct routing turned on, and that you have the direct routing summing mode is on. Otherwise, it'll only send it to one group. But now, as we can see, that we can minimize and kind of optimize the audio performance across to take advantage and use all of your different CPU cores easily. All right. All right, so we see from George, his question is, so if I have the control setting set to disabled, I would expect that I could still scroll vertically in the mixer when many tracks are collapsed. But in my case, I can't find a space where vertical scrolling works. All right, so I'll just load up kind of a larger project here. Okay. So let's say if I'm in, I'll come over here. So let's say we're going to have, if I'm in my full screen mixer, and right now I just have my, we'll check the preference. It's under editing, project mix, to controls. So now I'm set to disable. So let's say, if we have everything collapsed here, all right, it doesn't scroll, but let's say if I open up something, let's say the EQs, which takes a lot of vertical space. Let's open up inserts. Let's open up channel strip. Let's open up sends. So now when I'm just hovering anywhere in the mix console, it's scrolling vertically. So I'll just open up my Q sends, my direct routing, quick controls, let's say modulators, pre-section routing. So, and let's tuck it away. Let's go to our lower zone and we'll raise this. So if we come over to EQ, to sends, direct routing, I could still kind of scroll here. So if you're scrolling in the lower zone, this is kind of divided. While we see these little 4 lines, there's a division line between kind of the lower zone of the mixer and the higher upper zone. But that allows me to scroll in the upper zone. But if I'm here, you may not notice any scrubbing. But anywhere here, you can just simply scrub. And it, and also if you sometimes in the if we go into the inspectors, maybe try hovering over one of the tabs to start with, and let me know if that works. But if you're trying to vertically scroll in the mixer from the lower zone, that won't work. That they function independently like that. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, Alti and Lee says, is there a notation function for audio tracks? It's not really intended to work with audio like anything that has chords, but we can do a conversion like between chords, and let me just all right, so let's say, but we could do it for monophonic sources because we could do a conversion. So let me just revert this. All right, so let's say we'll take our bass part here. So what I want to do is just take this. I'm going to go into Very Audio. We'll say Edit Very Audio. I'll just do, and from Very Audio, we could say, let's extract MIDI. Come over here. So now I'll open it in the score editor, and we could see the transcription automatically. We could kind of clean that up in the MIDI domain as well. So let's say if I come here, I'm going to select all, and let's just quantize to eighth notes. And then you could just kind of come over here, and that's kind of your transcription of your bass performance. Just on solo. And then we could actually just kind of choose the particular instrument. So let's say we go to our settings, we go to instrument, and let's choose the instrument type. So we'll say we can make it fretted instruments, and we want it to be 4-string bass, and now we could adjust for the correct octave. So So for monophonic sources, you could do it. So, but it's not really going to design to work with like piano chords, guitar chords, stuff like that. But for monophonic instruments, you could work with it. All right, so we have from Crazy, says, hi everyone from Portugal. I've been using Suno to export stem track into Cubase. Could you explain the best method to catch the tempo of a song? I've been using tempo detection tool. So that's probably the best way to do it. So if I, let's Let's come over here, just do a new project. All right, so let's say if we listen to this particular project here, and there's no correlation with the click and the track, so, but now I have that selected. Just come over here to project, and let's go to tempo track to tempo detection. And now we have the tempo track. Automatically extracted, so. All right. All right, so we see from Val says a question. So according to the performance showcase, I should split my whole mix bus chain into separate group tracks and route those into each other in the row. So yeah, you could do that as well. So but yeah, it's interesting how the performance at the NAMM show, like I just really, we had kind of a group company dinner, and there's a bunch of my colleagues from Steinberg in Hamburg, and one of the performance engineers on the Mac side. I just happened to sit next to him at dinner and got to, we had just fascinating discussion of kind of performance. We were kind of geeking out on Cubase performance and how it works. So it was really enlightening for me. So. So we see from George, just says, that's weird, in your computer it works just fine. There must be something wrong with my PC, Windows 11. Our users seem to have the same problem. I'll look into it. Thanks anyways. Let me open up another laptop here, and I'll see if it behaves the same way on my laptop, which has Windows 11 on. It's a Snapdragon. Give me just a minute, get it booted up, and I'll just confirm that works the same. Yep, it's 1403. All right, just getting this going on my laptop quickly here. Yeah, so on my laptop in the lower zone, it was scrolling kind of as expected. Let me just add some more. Sections here. Yeah, it's working fine on my Windows machine without any issues, kind of just like what I just showed. So let me know if you have different behavior, George. All right. All right, Miguel Barosa says, is there a way to do lateral scrolling in the lower zone mixer without fear of the new preferences set to disabled? It could be done in the main mix console window. Why not in the lower zone? All right, so if we have a number of tracks here. All right. So I know, like, if we're in the full mix console, that we can just go into the fader area here and scroll, and that doesn't work in the lower zone. I've kind of reported it and had communications on it, but it doesn't work the same. But if you just kind of go to the lower, like, and it used to be that this was like a really tiny target, the white area here where we could navigate, but they made the target much larger. So on the lower zone mixer, you could just kind of come, just move a little below, and then we should be able to scroll. I'll reiterate that again, but I know the behavior is different, and it seems like it should be consistent throughout. But you have to kind of grab this little lower zone white area, or just in, doesn't have to be in a white area, but anywhere just below the track names, and you could use the scroll wheel to navigate between different mixer channels. All right, so we see from Audi and Lee says, very cool, thanks. And that's with the audio transcription. All right, so David Hellegard says, in previous versions of Cubase, this was possible to adjust a volume fader channel by moving the mouse vertically when holding the Alt key. All right, so let me... All right, so let me change my preference. So if it's in 13, so I'm just going to say, let's enable controls. All right, so let's come here. So let's say if we want like fine control. So I think that for the fine control, it's not going to be the Alt key. I think it's the Shift key. All right, it's possible to adjust the volume fader by adjusting the mouse vertically while holding down the Alt key. So I think it's the Shift key that gives it fine control and not the Alt or Option key. So try the Shift key. So when I have the Shift key on, when I have it off, we see kind of, and now I hold the Shift key down, and that gives you kind of fine control, not the Alt or Option key, but try just the Shift key, and that should give you kind of like fine control. All right. All right, so we see from George, and for later Club Cubase live stream, it would be okay if I sent you a Cubase project with a MIDI bass line. It seems as if Hallian electric bass is out of tune, and I can't control where on the neck it plays. Yeah, so feel free to send a project over. I'd be happy to look at it, and then I could show you on the electric bass how to. There are key switches to make it play on particular strings. So let's go ahead and just open it up here. Right. All right, so. All right, so say we want to play this this particular. Now, when we come over here, we could say, okay, I want to force the. Let me see if I get my controller mapped correctly here. Okay, so now when I come over here, we could only have the notes that are on the E string. If I come here, now this is only playing notes on the A string. And if I come here, we can say this is going to be the D string, and this would be on the G string. So if I want to so we could take this like this G, so we could say, okay, this is an open G. This is a G on the D string, on the A string, and on the E string. So you could pick, and actually there's key switches so that you could maintain and pick exactly which string that note is on. So you could try that. Now this could also go along, there are different kind of player styles, so you could choose different players here, so you could avoid open strings if you want more country patterns or more funk patterns. So, you know, and this could also choose like what position on the fretboard, that on the fingerboard, that the actual bass is doing, but you could manually play these particular notes and force the string right here with these key switches. So that was, you know, like when he first showed this to me, I'm like, oh, I would so love to just be able to pick what string that a G is on, because it makes a total difference, you know, whether you're kind of up on the E string or playing an open string or the D and A string. So you could force that within the electric bass instrument here in Halion, or that comes with the Absolute. All right, so we see Gerald Ely joining from Martinez, California. Yeah, we see from George, it says, yeah, so you could send the project to clubcubase at steinberg.de, and we could do it on the 27th when we come back. All right, let me scroll up. All right, so George says, for scrolling, I still have the problem that my horizontal scroll wheel MX Master is inverted, left goes to right, and vice versa. The problem arrived with the first update of Cubase 14. Yes, I don't think that there's a way. Let me just take a look. I don't think that there's a way to change the direction. I know I've seen some discussions on it. Yes, I don't think that there's a preference for that. So currently, but hopefully maybe in the future. I know it could be a bummer. All right, so we see Paul D says, hi Greg, I've tried using Cubase to send SysEx data to a K1 to restore presets. It only worked with MIDI file data and without any additional settings. Both the SysEx and MIDI files came directly from the Kawai website, so both should work. I read that SysEx is more sensitive to the MIDI cable. Is that true? So a lot of times when you're sending SysEx data, and one of the tricks could be, so a MIDI file is probably like the best way to transmit SysEx. SysEx is just kind of recorded as MIDI data. When you work with this in Cubase, you want to go to the preferences and go to MIDI filter, and then make sure that SysEx is unchecked right here. And then you would just record it as, as SysEx, you would just, if you have a MIDI file with that, at that point, we want to just simply make sure that the SysEx isn't being filtered out, and then, play the MIDI file back to the device. Sometimes some devices need to be on if I remember right, some devices may need to be on a certain MIDI channel, or like the channel could be it could be sensitive to the MIDI channel. So you might want to try switching on the track, like either to channel 1 for like on the MIDI track, try set it to MIDI channel 1, or maybe to any if that still doesn't work. But SysEx data is just MIDI information, and often people would pass along that SysEx data directly to, to transport it to different sequencers. You would just simply, at that point, take the SysEx and just play back the sequence and send it back to device. So, old days, what you do if you did lots of programming is you would do a SysEx dump for each of your devices, and give a couple measures for all the SysEx data to get sent out for the instruments to kind of set their state and then play. So, but it is always a bit finicky because it was often trying to send more information down a MIDI cable, because the MIDI, cable is like 31K baud. So if we're going way back when to dial up modems, like when 56K modems were out, that was just going beyond what the MIDI spec was. So, and make sure that you're not filtering SysEx on the device itself, because a lot of times I have a K1-2 that you could choose to protect the internal sounds by filtering out incoming SysEx data so it didn't wipe out all of your patches. So a couple things to try there. See, Miguel Barossa says, thanks for the reply. I think it should be the same in a lower zone mixer with the new preference. It's now safe to scroll around without messing the faders. So I agree with you. So, all right, so we see from FlyV says, I just recently got Cubase Pro 14 license authorized in 2 separate PCs. I never used to be able to do that. What happened? So we, when we were migrated from the e-licenser to the Steinberg account system, the e-licenser people liked the fact that they could have their Cubase installed in multiple machines and move the USB e-licenser between machines. So with that, so you had one license that was transportable, and now that the USB e-licenser is in legacy mode, Steinberg allowed for the ability to have 3 different computers that were authorized. If you have a laptop, a home studio, and maybe a professional studio, then you could run your license on three different computers at once. So. Okay, so we see from, I think it's from Pre, says, can you shed any light on getting the best possible performance from a V1M with X in Nuendo 13? So let me know what you mean by the V1M, and I assume it's external effects, going back to your previous question. if it's a version 1 like M series processor, so if it's like, like, so let me know if you could clarify that. That would be helpful. All right, so we see from Paul D, just says the keyboard received programs from both transmission methods, but with SysEx, only the program names were correct while the waveforms were completely jumbled. What could be the reason? So sometimes, I'm not sure, like, the waveforms, if that's what, like the waveforms in the ROMs were completely jumbled. So generally those are kind of fixed in most kind of romplers like the K1. So I'm not sure if the SysEx data would affect the ROMs, because those are kind of, read-only memory that can't be adjusted, but, how you manipulated the information with the SysEx on different programming for accessing the different, ROM chips, that could be, that generally is what I would think that the SysEx data would do, and not necessarily, give you a different, ROM chip or ROM capabilities. All right. All right, so we see from David, so he says, holding the Alt key over the little slider, the volume fader on the fader of the left zone channel. So is it... All right, so let me see if it's here. If it's here, you still have, if it's like with the clip gain volume, the shift key still kind of gives you fine control, or this is with the shift key, without the shift key, kind of with the shift key. So you get, and that's kind of a general, like even if we go to, a plugin. So let me know if that's what you mean, but like, let's say even if we are here, we activate the EQ, with the shift key, we get fine control. So I think it's consistent, but let me just reread that, make sure. Okay, the Alt key over the little slider volume fader in the left zone channel. So if it's over here, again, shift key. If we're here, so it doesn't seem to maybe make a difference on that slider, but most of the controls, fine controls with the shift key. But let me know if I'm in the wrong area. Let me know if it's this area. But the shift key is definitely giving you fine control there. All right, wonderful to see Michael Marshall checking in from Somerset in UK. Glad you can make it today. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so we see Rashab Saxena says in Cubase we have to click a track to see its volume fader. Please add a simple volume slider under each track in the name. Arrangement view, like in Studio One or Ableton, would make the workflow faster. Yeah, so I guess I've passed that on, so we see like a little volume and maybe even pan there. That would be nice, but you know, these I think are also just kind of very ingrained, you know, to always have kind of the inspector. So if you're here, we could just, you know, adjust the volume, you know. So if we have kind of our settings here, I could adjust, you know, the volume in like 5 different places. So I could come over here, I could adjust the volume with my mouse, I could adjust the mixer volume here, I could adjust it here and here, all within, without having to go to like a separate track. But I'll pass that along for volume, and I assume pan would be good there as well. So all right, so we just see how would you set up Cubase on a MacBook Pro M1 plus 2 extra screens, 1 screen for tracks, second one for the mixer, third for effects. So I'm not sure, someone just told me recently, and I'm not sure if this is true, I never tried it with my M1, but the M1 couldn't do multiple screens. So whatever capability that you have, if you have 2 different screens, it's just really a matter of going into like your system settings, and probably you go to displays, and then you would see all of your available displays here, and you could basically treat them as one large screen or separate screens and just drag the windows around. So, but if your computer's video card doesn't support that, but I just had someone tell me that, you know, they were certain that, and I only tried my M1 with 1 screen at the time, but that you couldn't output to more than 2 screens, but it seems like you would be able to with like a Thunderbolt adapter of some sort. So, but as long as the screens are available here within your operating system, if they're connected and you have the right hardware, then you could just simply move your Cubase, you know, windows over to different screens and maintain the screen position. So, you know, it's very common for film composers to have, you know, a project window, a mixer window, a VST instrument window, and, you know, the most important to many composers is going to be the key editor window. And that's usually on the biggest screen because they spend so much time in the key editor. All right. Okay, so we see, okay, so it's an icon. Okay, thanks, Pre. It says my mistake, the V1M is the controller. So let me scroll back up. Thanks for the clarification. Okay, so going back, can you add any light on getting the best possible performance with so when you say with X in Cubase, maybe Pre, if you could just let me know what you mean. Is that external effects or external or so the EXTs? If you could clarify that for me, I would appreciate it, Pre, just so I can help out. Sorry for being dense. Okay. Let me see. Jazz Dudes posted the link. I'll just open it in a new tab here on my monitoring computer. Okay. Yeah, but let me know what the EXTs are, Pre. That'd be helpful. All right, so David just says, sorry, I'm not clear. So I'm probably on my end. It says in the inspector tab, you can only adjust the volume of a channel by moving the dot horizontally. In previous versions, I was able to move my mouse vertically while holding Alt, and a little fader window would appear, allowing me to adjust the volume channel better. All right, so, all right. All right, so it says you can adjust the volume of a channel by moving the dot horizontally. So I guess it's here. Okay, so go here. All right, so yes, I don't see the pop-up. I think I know, so I'm not sure maybe if it was mitigated for the fine control here. I'll kind of dig into my computer has this like older versions of Cubase and see if I could replicate the behavior and make sure that so it's so just so I'm understanding David, and sorry for not understanding previous questions. It's this dot here, and you want to hold down kind of the Alt or Option to like do fine control here on this. I noticed that the fine control doesn't work here, but it works here and here and other areas. And if we grab the fader here, we get fine control, but I think I remember seeing like the little pop-up thing there, but just let me know if this is the right area, David, and I could do some research for the next live stream after my holiday. All right, so we have a question from the Tuba guy. I have a question regarding macros/automation. I'm trying to set up to be able to disable the first insert of a selected track, or even better, of tracks in a given folder. Is this possible? Okay, so let's create, I think we could do it with the project logical editor. So let's say I want to take these particular tracks, and we'll go to the inserts, I'm going to enable my Q-Link. And let's just put distortion. I want to put EQ. All right, so say we have a number of plugins here, and so I want to be able to disable the first insert of selected tracks. Okay, so let's go over to the project logical editor. Okay, so we say we want to transform, and we're going to say container type is track, and we'll say our property is set to is selected, and we want to take track operation. It's enable insert slot by number, so we'll say disable insert slot 1. Okay, so I'm going to make this a little smaller. So let's say I will deselect this track in the middle, and we'll see if, so right now we could just come over here and disable those particular inserts that are in slot 1 for selected channels. So transform, container type is equal to track, property is set to is selected. We want to go to the track operation, enable insert slot by number, and we could choose to disable, enable, so don't get hung up on the that it just says enable and you want to disable, or we could just choose to toggle. So now I could just come here and toggle on and off those particular tracks like that. Or we could choose to just disable, and this way if you wanted to toggle, you don't have to create a turn on, turn off separate presets. So let me know if that's doing what you want to do from the tuba guy. See, Alan just says, hi everyone, don't you wish it was like The Matrix and we could get Tank to upload what Greg knows about Cubase file? Thanks, Greg. That's very kind. But I really suck at Excel, so I do like a bunch of Excel work. So I understand how people going through learning Cubase as I kind of do software I'm not familiar with, so I'm try to be very empathetic. So all right, so we see from PA Music, hi Greg, when I open an instrument and create a second channel, it doesn't open as channel 2. Also, when I click on edit on the mixer from the side panel, it'll go back to channel 1. Okay. All right, so we'll start from scratch for this. All right, so I'm going to open up an instrument. Okay, so let's do a Hallian Sonic. And let's say, okay, we have our, let me transpose up to something. All right, so we have that. So we open up our instrument. All right, and I create a second channel. It doesn't open as channel 2. So when if I wanted to load a different instrument, let's say on channel 2 here, so let's say I want to do like an etude piano. All right, so now when I go to add a MIDI track, and I have the instrument track selected, I go to add a MIDI track. At this point, we'll say, right now it's I had it set to channel 2, so it might be from an earlier choice. So when this function was added, I think maybe in 8, if I'm not mistaken, that it would, when we would add a MIDI track, it would automatically, and we added a MIDI track with an instrument track selected, it would automatically go to channel 2. Then in version 13, 12 or 13, when we added MIDI tracks, at that point, they added the ability to set a particular MIDI channel. So if you just set this to MIDI channel 2, so now when we play, I'll get the Wurlitzer here, and I go down to the next track. Well, it's not automatic. You set it to channel 2. It's now automatically set to channel 2 of Hallian. But again, it's when this is selected, add the MIDI track. And just set channel 2, but if that's where the last time you had, so let's see if I set it to channel 13, I say let's add track. When I come over, let me add a new instrument track. So say I'll do, and now when I go to, I have that selected and I go to add, it will, I think the channel will stick when I go to add MIDI track. We'll see if it's at 13. So if you leave that at 2, you won't have to necessarily change. And if I leave this on channel 2 and I add multiple channels, so let's say I add 6, now those MIDI channels, when you look at it here, will be MIDI channel 1. This will be channel 2, channel 3. So that will automatically increment, but you have to kind of make sure that the first one is set correctly. So let me know if that is kind of what you're running into. All right, so we see the tuba guide just says I'm aware of Q-Link, but it's an extra step. So yeah, and if you need to, the tuba guide for that logical editor preset, you could assign it to a keyboard shortcut if you wanted to. Okay, so we see from pre, it says the external plus 8 more channels. So probably, like if we look at the icon controller, so I'm pretty sure it's a Mackie control protocol. So if you wanted to, if you needed to run 2 or 3 or 4 of those, what you could do is just simply go to your studio menu to Studio Setup, and we'll add a Mackie control device. Okay, so we would see the first device set the MIDI input and output ports for that particular device. Then just simply add another Mackie control, set the input and output channels for that device. Come over, and if you wanted to have 24 physical faders, come right over here, add additional Mackie control and set the input and output. So each of those devices should have a unique MIDI input and output port for each of the devices. Set those up, and now you'll have 24 channels of the control surfaces. So sorry for being dense and not understanding your question, Pri. Okay. All right, so we see from PA Music, says also my program seems to freeze when I open Distortion, VST, and the drum track seems glitched when I make or take away parts. Will still play. All right, so let's take a look. I'll just start from scratch here. Okay, so let's come over. Let's just program a quick beat here. We'll just randomly generate. All right, so let's say if we start taking away. All right, so let's say if we have this, so just kind of taking away different sounds. So let's say, so I haven't really, and let me see if I open up the Distortion plugin. So kind of seems to be working as expected, but let me know if I did anything differently than you did with that. Okay, so we see FlyV says, I'd like to have better access to editing in Mix Console with the scroll wheel, but it doesn't work. How can we change that setting to work? All right, so let's say if we want it to come over, so let's say you're in the Mix Console and you want to use your scroll wheel. So check this setting, preferences, and this is in 1403. If you go to editing to project and Mix Console, or I'm sorry, go to, I think it was, if in 1403, if you go to preferences, you know, now we could just say enable, and now we could, you know, like I liked as kind of a poor man's control surface, being able to kind of just ride faders like just from right there with my mouse scroll wheel. So you could do that. And there was kind of a preference in earlier versions, like 1402 and earlier, I think it was under project and Mix Console, or editing in general, where there's a disable mouse scroll wheel for Mix Console changes. So try adjusting those preferences. All right, so David asks, or David just clarifies, yes, that's what I'm talking about. The pop-up silence arrow is really helpful to adjust the volume with natural hand motion and just display big project window inspector. Thanks. Okay, I'll look into that. All right, so we see the Tuba guy says, many thanks to the time for upgrading Cubase 12. The option enable insert lot by number was not implemented. So it might be in 12. I'm pretty sure that it's in 12. I'm inclined to say that it's in 12. But, you know, if it's not, you know, that's in the later versions. Okay. George is hoping for a sale on the Simon Phillips drums. Okay. All right, so we see from PA Music says, seemed a lot faster before adding multiple channels for contact, and why does the other channels look different to channel 1? It's, you know, when we do that, it's because, you know, so we'll start off here. Let me just, so it's really just the same, except for it doesn't automatically add to channel 2 as before. So if we remove these selected channels, so let's add our instrument track. So we'll do our Hallian Sonic, so say multi-timbral. And now when I go to add MIDI tracks, I could just say, okay, we're going to start at channel 2. And I want to add, let's say 415. So now I add tracks. So this is the instrument track that's hosting the instrument. And these are MIDI tracks which are routed to the instrument. So functionally very similar, but that's the same way it's been done in Cubase for years. And just further point from PA Music, just says, say if I had a contact open on channel 1, I could just use a key tab, or loading another instrument would follow the patch. Yeah, so I'm not sure how contact works in this regards, but, you know, if I have, let's say, a patch on channel 1 here on that instrument, I come to channel 2, I have this instrument, I have the electric bass on channel 3, and let's do an FM lab here on channel 4. So now when I would select the particular instruments, the instrument would automatically load. So there's that capability. I'm not sure if Contact supports that or not, but you could just simply switch between the active channel. So that capability exists. we see from PA Music on his says, say if I contact open on channel 1, I could just use a key tab, or loading another instrument would follow the patch. Mute some channels, export it and stuff. Just maybe it's when I'm using my own samples using MediaBay. So, all right. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, so we see from Flyv says editing of the volume of a track on the main window doesn't edit fine volume with the shift button plus scroll wheel. All right, so if we have like an audio, I'm not sure if we have an event volume here. I feel the weight. So let's say I drag that there. So if I just kind of click and let me just, so say if we click here and drag this up, so now if I hold down the shift key for the clip volume, if we grab our volume here and then hold down the shift, that gives me fine control. Here's fine control as well for the shift. It's just not fine control here. So let me know if that makes sense or if I'm misunderstanding Flyv. All right, so we see Flyv says shift plus drag in the mix console works with fine editing and the scroll wheel now. Right on. Okay, that's great. All right, let me jump to another question that was mailed in. Okay, so a question, while working in the key editor with MIDI lanes and articulations, I usually switch between different views, show used controllers, show only velocity, etc. Is there a way to keep the lanes height that I set? Every time I change the view, the lanes reset to default height, and I have to adjust them again. All right, so. Okay, so let's say I'll just do some 20th century composition here. 21st century. All right, so let's see if we could, so let's say if we have, right, so let's come over here. Let's say if we have modulation, let's open a controller, like the articulation lane here. Okay, so let's say if I have this, and let me see if I save this as a preset. So I'm going to add a preset. We'll call it June 17th, 2025. Okay. I'm going to make this really tall. Okay, so let's see if when we load up, if we save it as a preset, if it's, looks like the sizes are preserved. Let's see when they're saved as a preset. So maybe try just, and if you click on the little drop down triangle arrow here, that you could just simply at this point choose to add a preset, and then at that point we could just So let's say if I move this down here, let me add another controller. So let's say balance. All right. Have this. Let's go back to our first preset. We'll make this tall and this short. And we'll see if the heights are preserved. So we see all three. The heights are preserved. Come here, tall velocities. So try just to save it as a preset, and then it knows kind of the heights that you're going for and want to preserve. All right, let's jump back to live questions. All right, let's see if there's any more questions. Great time to ask questions. Go ahead and all right, so let's see if there's any more questions that come in. All right, so we see from George says, I have to leave now. Thanks a lot, Greg. Enjoy your vacation. I'm looking forward to meeting you again in July. I will make use of my vacation to dig into making music. That's what it's all about, after all. I hope you're able to make some wonderful new music. And thanks for being on the live stream. We'll see if there's more questions come in. If not, we'll wrap up early. See, Val just wished me a great vacation. Looking forward to it. My wife's already over there, so I had to take my son on Thursday night. And if anyone has any tips on Dublin, please feel free to email them to clubcubase@steinberg.de. You see, nice comment from Roland Stuff says, just wanted to say many thanks for all the wisdom you freely share, Greg. So I think it's imperative that if you have knowledge on something that it's, at a certain level, you have to share it with other people and pass it on. So. All right, let's see if there's more questions. See, Jazz Dude's advice, don't mess with trolls in Ireland. They hide under stones. Okay, I'll keep my eyes out for them. Maybe I'll see him on a bus going through the countryside. All right, so it looks like I'll give it another maybe 10, 20 seconds, but it looks like we're out of questions. Looks like everyone is learning their Cubase very well. We're getting a lot of great questions. So again, we'll be back. I'll be on vacation, as probably heard, for the next 2 live streams, but we'll be back June 27th, and I think that's going to be the last live stream of the month. So we'll do our Zoom hangout. So look forward to seeing everyone on the Zoom meetup. And then maybe the week after, I think the 4th of July, which is kind of a big holiday here in the United States, will be on a Friday. So I'll probably take that day off for a live stream. But if you wanted to do the live stream on Tuesday and Thursday of that week on July 3rd, let me know, and I'd be happy to do it on the 3rd. If that makes sense for people's schedules, but let me know in the comments if that works for you. We're seeing Artist Knows Love just once people hit the like button. And I guess with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. Thanks for all the great questions. I look forward to doing more live streams as soon as we get back. As soon as I get back from vacation. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy. And we will see you on June 27th. Take care. Goodbye.